Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to today's virtual roundtable event, Stronger Together, Kentucky, Ohio, and the European Union. My name is Todd Schwartz, Executive Director of the European American Chamber of Commerce here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Before we begin today's discussion, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screen is a menu bar where you can submit questions through the Q&A function, or if you'd like to ask a question live using your webcam, please use the raise hand function. Feel free to submit your questions at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A portion of our program. And don't forget that after our trade panel, we've organized a matchmaking event where you can meet one-on-one with EU and EU member state trade representatives to discuss business opportunities, plan follow-up discussions, exchange contact information, and more. If you have not signed up already, we will place the link in the chat for Conversation Starter, the matchmaking and networking platform we're using today. To register takes less than 5 minutes, so please be sure to join us. One last note, we are recording this presentation today, and it will be posted to the EU and the US YouTube channel in the near future. I'd now like to introduce Kate Shanks. She is the Vice President of Public Affairs at the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and she will welcome our distinguished first pair of speakers.
Thank you so much, Todd, and thank you to everyone for joining us today for this very important discussion about trade, which is, of course, very important to the business community in Kentucky and also Ohio. The Kentucky Chamber is proud to come together with the European Union and European American Chamber of Commerce today to increase European trade efforts for our region. The Chamber stands behind businesses as they grow their global presence and seek international partnerships. Our partnerships with the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development, Discover Kentucky, has allowed us to begin fostering relationships between European and Kentucky businesses, and we are excited for what's to come. Discover Kentucky is a member benefit that presents opportunities including potential distributor agreements, corporate partnerships, and increased trade. The state's economy will benefit as the initiative creates and nurtures relationships aiming to translate them over the long term into investments, new facilities, and jobs for Kentuckians. This event is such a great opportunity to bring together businesses in pursuit of that same goal. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce our first speakers today. Joining us is Stavros Lambrinidis, the ambassador of the European Union to the United States. Prior to his current role, he served as the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. He was Foreign Affairs Minister of Greece and was twice elected member of the European Parliament with the Greek Social Democratic Party. Also joining us is John Husted, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio. He previously served as the Ohio Secretary of State and as Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives. Lieutenant Governor has had an extensive career in economic development dating back to his time at the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce, a fellow Chamber of Commerce leader. So with that, gentlemen, I will turn it over to you, and Ambassador, let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's so fantastic to be here and with John Husted, indeed, the Lieutenant Governor of Ohio. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the Kentucky Chamber, to the European American Chamber of Commerce for joining with the European Union to host this event. Welcome, of course, to all our viewers. Dear friends, it's been said often that all politics is local politics, certainly in the US, in Europe as well. But you know what? Turns out all diplomacy is local diplomacy as well. And when it comes to getting our economies and our societies out of COVID, this is even more important than ever before. We are organizing this very local event as European Union to celebrate our relationship with Ohio and with Kentucky. It is a relationship that, in terms of trade and investment, it is huge. We have, from Ohio alone, Ohioans exporting last year, even during COVID, more than $11 billion worth of goods and services to the European Union. There are European Union investments in Ohio and the greater Cincinnati area in particular, in which way more than 50% of European member states are investing. The attractiveness of the region, of Ohio, of Kentucky, is of paramount importance. And these investments create jobs, about 140,000 jobs in Ohio alone from these investments. Now we have an opportunity with this event to go deeper, to ensure that as we climb ourselves out of COVID, the European and American partnership, economic and trade partnership, boosts and steam engines our economic recovery. And so, John Husted, the Lieutenant Governor of Ohio, it is a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be able to welcome you here today. We in Europe will be boosting our recovery, and we already have began, by focusing on trade and investment with the United States, perhaps more than anything else. Keep in mind, our two economies represent about 1/3 of the world's trade and about half of the world's GDP. Isn't that amazing? I mean, this is the biggest economic artery for the world economy. And the better and the faster we recover in Europe, the better and the faster the US will benefit from that recovery. The investments and the trade that the US has with the EU and that Ohio and Kentucky in particular have will go up. And certainly our recovery will benefit from the US economic recovery. So we are in this together. We need to have each other's back. But Lieutenant Governor, how do you see the European Union's presence in Ohio? How do you see the next steps coming out of the recovery? And where should we focus on primarily to reboost our economies coming out of this? Great to have you. Great to see you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Lambrinidis. It's wonderful to be with you. I have lots of flags in the background here. I need an EU flag to add to my collection.
I'll ship this to you after the event.
Well, first of all, I think it's always good when you're trying to create a relationship to understand that you share common values. And in our society today, and around the globe, I think that it's important to remind ourselves how much the United States and the EU have in common as it relates to our aspirations for our people, for our businesses, and for the globe. And we know that we have been longtime allies economically and beyond, and we need to constantly remind ourselves with that to know that while we have disputes from time to time, that we have more in common than we have that aren't in common. And it's important for us to build those stronger relationships economically and politically. We have a number of member states of the EU who have operations in Ohio, and obviously Ohio and Kentucky, closely related in the Cincinnati area. I know that there are more than half of the member states of the EU have investments, businesses in the Cincinnati region. I visited one of those, Festo Didactic, to look at a German company where I was looking at their apprenticeship program. And look, I think there's a lot to learn there about how we educate and train people in a tech-infused economy and how we leverage what each of our respective nations and trading partners do well, and to accentuate those things to build closer intellectual property alliances, to share information, to work together across government and business boundaries to strengthen our nations, our respective nations and economy. You asked the question about how we come out of this together. Look, I think we did that in many cases with our drug companies and the development of the vaccines, and the sharing of information and sharing of those vaccines as we come along in this process to create a health recovery. And once you have a health recovery and you have trust in that, then you can build on the economic recovery. I think that there are, a number of things that we would love to have are everything from more direct flights between our area to member nations. Those kinds of things are helpful. We are hosting, by the way, I need to mention this, the Solheim Cup in Ohio, where we will welcome European golfers, women golfers to Ohio, and hopefully create some business relationships as well. Although obviously we know who each of us will be rooting for respectively. in that competition. But I guess I would answer that question by saying, build on these commonalities, build on the relationships we have, build that trust, understand that we have more in common than that which divides us, and use that as the basis for going forward.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And indeed, I think the European American Chamber of Commerce just came out with this report looking at the investment in the greater Cincinnati region. And it's a fantastic report. You can see every European company investing in the greater region in Ohio. And I would say that indeed you touched on many issues. You mentioned values, and that is so important. I mean, what people often forget is that when we export our goods in our containers, we don't just export our goods, we also export our values. When we export in our containers from Europe, we export respecting labor rights. We export respecting the environment, not producing cheap goods by destroying the environment. We export the value of free, open competition, markets, and innovation. And indeed, other countries around the world are a challenge in this. China is the most classic example, and a very complex country to work with. What is your view of the role that free and open trade can play, and what is your view about China in this context, including in Ohio? Where can one look at China as an unfair competitor that has to be re-engaged with the international legal order? Where can one see China as a systemic rival that simply has to be confronted? Where can we cooperate with China, if at all? Are these issues that come up in your discussions in the state?
Yeah, I think that these are the discussions that are among the most important discussions in the world right now. I couldn't have said it better than you did about the values as it relates to labor, the environment, all of those conversation points that we are respecting as partners with the European Union. The thing, that's what I was mentioning. The things that divide us on this are not as great as the things that divide us from the rest of the world. And we have to more closely work together in these conversations on environmental policy, on trade policy, on human rights issues, and not to dictate to other nations how they must do things, but that if we want to have these kinds of trusting, because the key word is trust. Do you trust each other? I believe that America and the European Union trust each other, basically to honor our commitments when we sign in a document, when we shake a hand, when we make an agreement. There are other nations in the world, in particular China, who I don't think that level of trust exists with. And it is up to both of our continents, the United States, because look, we have great trading partnerships with Mexico and Canada. We have handled this as a North American in North America, even though these countries are very different from one another. The EU is very closely aligned in these conversations. And I think it's important for our governments to demand this of anybody who wants to participate in the global economy with trust and with free and fair and trustworthy trading relationships. And so,
thank you.
Look, we face challenges with China. Yeah, we face challenges on our tech platforms and trusting those. We have issues with relationship to intellectual property protections, just cybersecurity issues. Those are just starters, and so those issues have to be worked through for the trust to exist to truly have the kind of relationship that we ultimately would want to have with other nations that I do believe we do have with the EU.
I couldn't have said it better, and I'm so grateful for your analysis there, spot on in our view as well. And you have mentioned a couple of times in your intervention the differences that have existed in the past between the EU and the US. I suppose it's almost inevitable in the two biggest, most open and free economies in the world, where we really respect all these rights that you mentioned and we respect free competition, that there will be some differences. Some of them, however, as we come out of the recovery, and as we're trying to boost the transatlantic economic and trade relationship, we feel are important to be able to finally resolve. They shouldn't have been there to begin with, in our view. Thankfully, already we have agreed to freeze the tariffs that we have placed, Americans and Europeans, on the long-standing Airbus and Boeing dispute, and try to find a solution there, which is going to be hugely important for the whole industry, not just the airline industry, but the millions and millions of companies, small and medium enterprises that supply it with everything. But another dispute that is outstanding, and we hope to be able to do the same thing, suspend all tariffs from both sides, is the 232 national security steel aluminum tariffs. These were imposed by the previous administration. As you know, the European Union has very clearly said it's not a national security threat to the United States. It couldn't be. And in fact, for all the reasons we discussed today, we are, the two most fair competitors that exist. We do have an issue with Chinese overcapacity in steel aluminum, there's no question. But that has to be resolved between the two of us. Our tariffs are countermeasures to the U.S. tariffs are bound now to increase automatically on June 1st. So we are very, very engaged with the U.S. administration to try to resolve this dispute before that. How do your constituents see the relationship and the tariffs in terms of their own well-being, prosperity? Is there something that they want to see in place, or is there something that they would like us to ideally manage to get rid of?
Yeah, it's quite a complicated issue for both of us. You mentioned early on in the conversation about politics being local. Oftentimes, these are state or local political domestic issues that also have national and international implications that we have to work through in our respective democracies. And oftentimes, I believe that the economy has changed so dramatically due to globalization and tech infusion into everything we do that's created economic displacement. And a lot of times when there's economic displacement, you want to look for a cause. And sometimes those causes can be directed at other nations and other businesses and other business and tariffs and tariffs are oftentimes a perceived quick and easy solution. But I think that we're at a point where it's important that our federal government and the European Union work through those conversations in a way that respects each other's national interests, that is empathetic to the domestic discussion that's going on in both nations, and identifies a pathway that we both believe is fair. Now, we know that fair is always in the eye of the beholder, and fair oftentimes is measured by outcomes, but rather than opportunities. I think that I go back to that word trust. If we build that trust with each other and have confidence that we can count on one another to enforce the agreements as they were intended, that we can work through these issues, and hopefully we can do so by June so that we minimize any disruption that doesn't necessarily have to occur.
Thank you. We share in that, and we have the political will to resolve these issues, not to escalate, but to de-escalate, to get rid of them honestly, and to focus on the real challenges, such as what's coming from countries like China, where only if the two biggest democracies and economies in the world work together can address effectively. And certainly, I think you put your finger on another topic, which is that foreign direct investment, and European investment in particular, is under no circumstances taking away jobs. To the contrary, it is creating hundreds of thousands of them. How do you see European investment in the state in the future, especially now with the new infrastructure package being discussed, given the experience up to now, and given also the experience of the practices that European companies use in Europe and use also in states like Ohio, whether it is the apprenticeships that you mentioned before, or training programs for workforce development. Can you say a little bit more about those? How extensive they are, how beneficial, in your view, they are, if they can be better, and what do they say about foreign investment, European investment in particular, in a state like Ohio?
Well, I'm a big believer that innovation and competition are virtuous, that they don't displace, but they enhance a nation's economy. And nobody has no nation, no business, no way of doing things is superior forever. You have to constantly get better, and we believe that European direct foreign investment in America is good for Europe and it's good for America, particularly because we have a level of trust that our intellectual property will be protected here and in the EU, and those are essential elements of helping us both, helping the businesses in our nation, to helping the European-centered businesses, and we welcome it. We welcome new ways of job training, new ways of solving problems. I think that you look at everything from robotics and automation in machinery. You go into many American companies and you see European designed and manufactured operating systems, and so it really has worked to enhance both of our nations from a manufacturing, agricultural point of view. I certainly believe it will continue to evolve in that way with technology as well.
Thank you. I have a final question, Lieutenant Governor, and it focuses on what we're going to be doing in Europe and what you might be doing here in the States, and that has to do with the so-called green recovery. We have determined in Europe that the biggest mistake we could make coming out of COVID is to try to reinvest in the sort of more polluting economy of the 20th century, and that instead the future of economic growth lies in investing massively in climate neutral technologies, new energy that will create millions of high-paying new jobs. We are way advanced in our investment there. We've seen that not only does it not kill economic growth, but it increases it. Since 1990, we have reduced our carbon emissions by more than 22% in Europe, and we have increased our GDP growth by more than 60%. And that was way before you had economies of scale for many of these things. What is the state of thinking about green investments, climate change, addressing those issues in Ohio, in the broader region, Kentucky as well? Is this something that is on your daily plate of thinking and discussion, or is it something that is not really a priority?
Well, it's a priority. It's not an ideology. I think the way I'm looking at it, and the way that I think a lot of people are looking at it, is that we know that we need to change the way that we're doing things to address issues with greenhouse gases. Okay, and there is every opportunity for conservation and using the science and innovation to help us do things differently. This is not something that's new. We've done this throughout the history of the economy, but we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is conscious of the fact that it's going to create displacement. I mean, for example, for every new car that you build with a motor and a battery, you are not building a car with an engine and a drivetrain. And so where you add in one place, you're going to lose in another. And so we have to be thoughtful about the transition, that it is both pro-environment, but also it is adapted in a way that it is beneficial to the economy, that we've adapted our workforce for those changes, that we're doing it in a thoughtful way, and minimizing disruption in those areas, because it is this is not a simple transition. It's a necessary transition, not a simple transition. But to your original question, it's absolutely something I think about every day, whether that is from a talent point of view, whether it's from an innovation point of view, battery, automobiles, self-driving automobiles, agriculture, all of these things are moving in a more sustainable direction. And but the key is, how do you do it great? How do you do it thoughtfully? How do you do it with innovation in ways that are sustainable over the long run? I think that we're beginning to learn more and more every day on how to do that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. These are issues that are on the top of our minds every day as well in Europe, and precisely because of that, as we have announced our major, massive shift to clean energy and clean economy, we have set up what we call a Just Transition Fund, which is a multi-billion-dollar fund, European Union fund, to support all these regions in Europe, including coal, mining, and other regions, but also regions that produce, let's say, traditional car engines as opposed to battery engines, to support them in their transition. We have determined that it would be a mistake, we've seen this in the past, to expect that the markets will take care of everyone. And we've also determined that if the green transition is going to be effective, it has to be a just one. And so we are massively invested in this, both governments and private industry. So much more to learn, including today, but even after that.
Yeah, your point is great. We're going to learn from this. We're going to learn all the time. We've learned from mistakes in the past on transitions that were not just, that led to displacement and frankly led to the economic displacement that forces conversations like tariffs and the like to address perceived or real inequities in the marketplace that have domestic political implications. So our ability to think through those things as government and business in a way that transitions in a thoughtful manner is essential to that success.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Governor John Husted, it was a real pleasure for me to meet you. I am so happy that we could together kick off this event today. All the best to you. All the best to the people of Ohio and Kentucky who are watching us. And please stay on, everyone, both for the remainder of the discussion and in the end for the company-to-company speed dating. Do we call it speed dating? I don't know what we call it. But whatever it is, it could bring a lot of love and a lot of prosperity if we are successful in it. So from my side, the EU ambassador to the United States, Lieutenant Governor, everyone, all the best for today.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. There was a question that came in. If you're interested in learning more about all of those European companies operating in and around the Cincinnati region, that European investment map, this is actually the launch of the event, of the new map. It will be available on our website. That's www.europe-cincinnati.com. It's actually being loaded as we speak. So if you want more information on that, but I think, certainly the ambassador's comments and the lieutenant governor's comments are inspiring to us to see what we can do to boost this trading relationship. Let's dive a little deeper into some of the issues that make this relationship so vital for those of us in Kentucky, Ohio, and the Cincinnati region specifically. Now, you'll have seen their bios when you registered for the event today, so I'm not going to read through those. Let me just introduce Kristen Najdi. She is the director of the Office of Western and Northern Europe for the U.S. Commercial Service within the U.S. Department of Commerce. James Sheehan is the chief executive officer with Mubea North America in Florence, Kentucky, just across the river. And Peter Young is the deputy head of the Trade and Agriculture section with the delegation of the European Union to the United States. Just a reminder, if you have any questions or comments at any point, please be sure to use that Q&A function to submit those. Or if you wish to raise your question live on your webcam, use the raise hand function. Kristen, let's just dive right into it and start with you. You know, we've heard from the ambassador, the EU's perspective on the importance of this EU trade and investment partnership. Maybe you'll just take a few moments from the US government point of view. Why is this relationship so important?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Todd. And thank you, everyone, for having me here as part of this panel. It's an honor to be part of this discussion and this group. And I'm very glad to be able to provide the Commerce Department perspective on the transatlantic trade relationship. My office at Commerce is Washington, D.C. based, and we closely monitor the commercial relationship with both the EU as a whole and also with specific countries in the region of Western and Northern Europe. And of course, as the ambassador so beautifully said, the US-EU commercial relationship is extremely significant and has a global impact. And we know that. And, the EU is both our largest trading partner and the leading source and destination for foreign direct investment into the US. According to the latest figures available, the bilateral goods trade totaled nearly $650 billion in 2020. And bilateral services trade was estimated at nearly $350 billion in 2019. And US FDI in the EU was over $2 trillion in 2019. And the EU 27 FDI in the US was $2 trillion in 2019, which is up 3.3% from the year before. So now on the issue of figures, sometimes the figures don't always match up in terms of the figures we use versus the figures the EU use. But, I don't want to get caught up in those semantics, because the bottom line is it's a huge relationship no matter which exact figures we look at. And the administration and the Department of Commerce know that US-EU cooperation and leadership is really essential to the global trading system, and engagement with our European friends and allies is a priority. As you know, we welcomed our new Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, not too long ago, and reinvigorating the trading relationships with our allies and partners, including with the EU, has been a priority for her. And that is part of the Biden trade agenda, of course, which overall seeks to repair alliances, restore U.S. leadership around the world by working with our allies. And as Commerce, we're focused on carrying out that agenda by helping SMEs access new markets, level the playing field, and working with allies to overcome unfair trade practices. As the ambassador noted, we are focused, just as the EU is, on recovering from COVID. I mean, that is the crisis that we are all facing right now, and we know we can't come out of it ourselves. So definitely we're looking for ways for European companies to work collaboratively with US companies to our mutual benefit, especially in key sectors such as digital and digitally enabled services, and also environmental solutions. And again, as I said, collaboration is really key here. We know that we have to focus on a partnership here with the European Union, and we really look forward to the years ahead. And I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
That's great, Kristen. I appreciate it. And let me turn to you, James, because again, we talk a lot about this in the big numbers, the big round numbers, and how important it is. And, in some ways we describe it as sweetness and light. I mean, you're in the mix. I mean, your German company, Mubea, has invested, literally millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, creating hundreds of high-paying jobs, in Northern Kentucky, supplying U.S. and European auto manufacturers. So, I mean, you're part of that success story. But as the ambassador and the lieutenant governor mentioned, I mean, it's not all sweetness and light. There are challenges, and some of those trade frictions that come when two big economies rub up against each other. That's impacted Mubea significantly. Maybe you can just quickly talk about not just the immediate impact, but how some of those frictions are impacting Mubea's long-term planning for its operations in North America.
Yes, thank you very much, Todd. First, I would like to say that we are very happy to be a part of the community here. I mean, Mubea has been here in the US for almost 40 years. And we feel privileged to play a role in this economy. But you're absolutely correct in terms of the tariffs. Since, if we're specific, since 2018, our customers and ultimately the consumers have paid about somewhere in the excess of 22 million in tariffs. And also additionally, we've had additional expense from legal expenses of about 2 million. Unfortunately, that makes the locations here in northern Kentucky less competitive to other locations in the region. So it's an absolute it's a challenge for us. We plan around it. We try and accommodate for it. But one of the issues that we had around the tariffs was obviously how quickly they were enacted, and also the uncertainty. And in business, uncertainty is something which one does not like. We are optimistic going forward, but obviously the viability and the attractiveness, unfortunately, of the northern Kentucky area has suffered due to the tariffs.
And clearly that's not just for a company like Mubea. I mean, that's for any European or international company. So, I mean, obviously these are important issues that need to be addressed. Peter, let me come to you. As I mentioned, when two big economies, and as the ambassador said, when two big economies start rubbing up against together in so many different areas, the way trade policy works is lots of unrelated industries can feel the pinch, here in the Ohio, Cincinnati, Kentucky region, we're interested in Kentucky bourbon, and of course, French wine has also taken a hit, as well as other products. So maybe you can just take a minute to help us understand the unintended consequences of some of these retaliatory tariffs, and also maybe talk about the other challenges that come up in the relationship, things like privacy issues or digital taxation.
Well, Todd, first of all, let me say how happy I am to be here and to join you for this conversation. I arrived on my posting in DC last summer, and I would very much wish to be with you physically in Cincinnati, but this is the best we can do. So I look forward to the time when I can actually travel and meet real people working in real life situations in business around this great country. Now, what I think I would like to say, in one sense, is of course the big numbers are huge, but of course the newspapers and the media are interested in the smaller numbers, the micro level in terms of the disputes and what that means for particular sectors, for particular exporters on both sides. I mean, I think we have the opportunity with the new administration to try and address these problems, and we are certainly serious on our side in wanting to do so, and we've made proposals. Ambassador Lambrinidis referred already to the suspension of tariffs on products relating to the aircraft dispute, whilst the two sides try and work out a resolution. We have made the same proposal for a temporary suspension, on in the area of steel and aluminium. But I mean, I think the fundamental problem in that sector is one which is not to be found in the relationship between the EU and the US. It's more of a global issue of overcapacity and the behavior and some of the practices of third countries, including China, where in fact the EU and the US have joint interests to try and address and deal with the problem, rather than creating additional tensions in our own relationship. And I think the same is true in a way also of the digital sector or the green sector. The ambassador talked about the policy imperative as seen from in European eyes of to manage and take forward a digital transformation and a green transformation of our economies. As that takes place, and of course different countries in different parts of the world are going at different paces and managing the process in a different ways, there is a risk of tension. And I think the best way to deal with that is through good communication, through anticipation of problems before they arise. And certainly the idea on our side is to engage with the Biden administration and with the government and with all other actors on the US side to explain what we're doing in Europe, and to see how far we can basically work together towards shared interests, as opposed to running the risk of creating new problems for ourselves. Now, one thing I'd like to say, just perhaps in contextual for the relationship. I mean, Christine from the DOC mentioned some of the headline statistics. So I won't repeat you with our version, although I can tell you they're also very, very large. But one thing that struck me is that basically roughly 1/3 of all trade in goods is driven by trade between companies, intra-company trades. In other words, European companies invested here in the US, creating jobs here in the US, but doing some of their sourcing from Europe for their supply chains, and vice versa. So, I mean, that is mutually beneficial. And I think the key word which came out very clearly from the Lieutenant Governor, which we also very much agree with, is the reliance on trust between our two economies. We do share very similar and fundamental values in terms of democracies and attachment to market economy principles. We do face a world in which that is not always the case in major partners that we have to deal with. And I think, therefore, it pushes the EU and the US to work together. And that's certainly part of our agenda for the transatlantic relationship. And we, from Brussels, from the EU, there have been a number of proposals and sort of reachings out to the new administration in Washington. And basically, we are very optimistic that we'll be able to deal and move forward and work together with the administration, and in the process deal with these some of these irritants which we have inherited from the last several years.
Peter, let me stay with you for just a minute. You know, the Biden administration has talked a lot about the importance of making trade policy work for the middle class and for workers, you know, arguably some of those who are being left behind by globalization. Briefly, does that resonate in Europe? And what should trade policy, what can trade policy do to make a difference?
Well, I'd say very much. I mean, one thing which the new US trade representative has talked about in her public statements is the importance for the US of developing a worker-friendly trade policy. In other words, a policy that isn't just seemingly driven by the interests of corporates and big business, and which in the past has perhaps led to rather sudden or abrupt transitions, which have affected ordinary people, workers, and consumers. We also in Europe have faced the same conversation in our domestic discussions. What is the goal of trade policy? Is it just to negotiate a good agreement, open markets, and then move on to the next one, but not worry too much or as much as we should perhaps about how goods are made or the values which they represent? And I think basically the conclusion which we have also reached on the other side of the Atlantic is that trade is very much about values, about the impact on the environment, on the implications for sustainability, on good labor standards, and good quality jobs. And basically, we have to show that trade policy contributes to those goals and use our trade policy instruments, such as tariff preferences for third countries or autonomous measures that we have, for example, to deal with unfair trade, in a way which actually supports all economic actors in the economy, and not just, if you like, the big business or the big bucks who can write the checks for the more sort of traditional approach of looking only at the bottom line. So, I mean, this is again an area where we look forward to deepening our cooperation and our conversation with the new administration, and to working out where can we work together, either on a global platform in terms, for example, of pushing for initiatives in the WTO that deal with climate or deal with the challenges of the health crisis brought by COVID, and how can we use our autonomous instruments, such as our GSP, such as our measures which deal with supply chain issues, to address also the situations in third countries which basically cause a can be a trigger, as again I think the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, can be a trigger to sort of protectionist pressures within our own economies, because people look outside our borders and see that situations under which products or services are being produced elsewhere are not comparable, and in some senses are considered to be unfair.
Yeah. Let me throw that question to James. And James, I'm going to put it in these terms. I mean, it's one thing to say we're respecting workers' rights. It's one thing to say that, we're, creating policies that support job creation and so forth. I mean, you create jobs. I mean, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
How does any of this translate, to those highly skilled workers that you've got, there in Florence?
I mean, as I mentioned, and I mean, certainly when it comes to tariffs, it challenges us economically to justify the investment here in northern Kentucky. I think a topic that is also. Mm-hmm.
Let me put it this way: what real actions would you need to see? Where you could say to your staff, "Hey, look. This is a good thing. This is a good thing for us. This is a good thing for Mubea, and it's a good thing for you and your families."
I think certainly walking back the tariffs, I think would be advantageous. I think it would improve the economic conditions. If you just look at the steel industry here in the U.S., I mean, I think there's less capacity now than prior to the tariffs. The price of steel continues to increase. I think what's most important for us, though, however, is certainty. We talk about the movement of goods, but we should also talk about the movement of people. The ability for us to send people to Europe, to train people in Europe, to have visas in Europe, but also to bring people from Europe here to the US to be able to improve the skill set in the local workforce, I think is also very, very important.
Yeah, I definitely, if we have time, I definitely want to come back to the workforce issue, because I think that's obviously a very important one. The governor mentioned, or Lieutenant Governor mentioned, the work that Festo and Festo Didactic is doing. I know you have a wonderful apprenticeship program working to build skills. But I want to, like I say, hopefully we'll have time to come back to that. Kristen, let me come back to you. The ambassador mentioned, and we've talked about these retaliatory tariffs a couple of times. The EU, the US, and the UK agreed about 5 weeks ago now to suspend those tariffs in the Airbus-Boeing dispute for 4 months, calling on negotiators to use that pause to see if we can find a settlement. I know we're early in that process. I'm not sure what role, where you are in that process, but, can you provide us a little bit of an update on where we stand? I mean, is there a settlement to be found?
Well, first of all, I do want to note that it was a great early example of, I think, the Biden administration's willingness to improve the trading relationship with the European Union. We certainly understand the concerns that are there regarding the tariffs that were placed in the last administration, and the suspension of the large civil aircraft tariffs is in accord with a March 5th US-EU joint statement that promotes the resolution of the dispute. So there's definitely willingness. It contemplates a mutual suspension. And during the suspension period that we're in right now, the idea is to refocus our mutual efforts, right, to resolve the long-running dispute. I think there's a commitment on both sides, as demonstrated by the suspension and by the statement, to reaching a comprehensive and durable negotiated solutions. Now, in terms of how that comes about, how, the details of all that, I do not know. That is really something that USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, is following closely. But I do know that, we see a great deal of willingness on both sides to really, move on this. I did want to take the opportunity also to maybe respond a little bit to the steel and aluminum tariff discussion, since we're kind of on the tariff topic. And again, we certainly understand the consternation over the steel and aluminum tariffs over the past few years. I mean, we all know, tariffs were imposed to address a negative impact of global overcapacity. That being said, at this point, the administration is reviewing many pre-existing measures that were put into place. Commerce is also reviewing the process for deciding on requests for exclusions from tariffs. We do understand that there is a substantial number of exclusion requests for products sourced from European Union member states. Roughly 1/2 of all the requests for both steel and aluminum submitted for exclusions are from the EU, and approximately 3/4 of those have been approved for exclusions. Again, that's not a perfect system, but just wanted to let you know that there is a process that is helping to some extent. And we have begun the process of generally excluding imports that do not receive objections from US producers from the tariffs. So this effort is ongoing. It may provide relief for specific EU producers. That doesn't solve the whole problem. And, we also understand the looming uptick in retaliatory tariffs on the part of the EU on June 1st. And this is clearly a priority topic of discussion between the EU and the US. There's constant discussions going on, and we hope for the best. So I just wanted to note what Commerce's view was on that. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Kristen. And I just want to remind the audience, if you have questions for any of our panelists, comments, reactions, please be sure to use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or if you wish to ask your question live, just click the raise your hand button. Peter, let me just ask you the same question to Kristen. I mean, again, yes, it's USTR that's taken the lead in these negotiations. Any update from the EU on where these negotiations might be going? Again, I know it's early in the process, so if the answer is no, then the answer is no.
Well, I think the process is going, and I think that's the important thing. And I think we are very conscious as on our side that in a way we have to make it succeed. This dispute on aircraft has gone on much too long. And the landscape of the sector has also changed in the last 15 years. It's no longer purely a duopoly between two companies, one American, one European, in the large civil aircraft sector. We're also having to deal with a realistic prospect of new entrants from third countries, and so therefore we come to the same sort of dynamic where the on one side, the EU and the US are arguing about the details of how each side supports its producers, its sector. But out there's also a third or a fourth or a fifth producer coming into the market with their own ways of supporting the sector. And suddenly we also have an interest and an imperative to discuss how to discipline that and have effective disciplines that bind all of us for the years ahead. So, I think, yes, we are determined to use the time available through this 4-month suspension to reach a solution. And I think basically similarly on steel and aluminium, I think it's very welcome from our side that the administration recognizes, if you like, that this is a global issue, and that, if you like, that Europe is not the trigger or the main cause of the problems facing the sector. But at the same time, we have these tariffs in place, which are affecting not just trade in steel and aluminium, but also some other products exported from the US to the EU. But this is also the way is to bring attention to the issue and also bring political focus. So we're very much hopeful and optimistic that we will be able to find a solution on this also in the coming months with the administration. And this is indeed on our side also a top priority issue on the list that we have for conversations with the new administration. But as I say, this to the audience, I'd also say we're not just focusing on these issues, if you like, inherited from the past. We're also very keen to get into discussions and to work together on topics that actually deal with the economy of the future, including the digital sector and how we work together in a trusted and reliable, resilient way on aspects to do with trade and technology and our respective mutual security. Coming back again to the theme of working together on a trusted partnership basis.
No, it's a good reminder, Peter, that while we do have to deal with issues from the past, we also want to focus on the future. And as you say, particularly things like the digital economy and so forth. I mean, there's obviously some great opportunities to grow there and to expand. Again, a reminder: if you've got questions or comments, please be sure to submit them. We do have a live question from our audience, and I'd ask Sam to go ahead and turn your camera on. Be sure to unmute your microphone, and let's see what he's got.
Sam Scales from Brown-Forman Corporation. Most people know us for Jack Daniels. And just appreciate the conversation here. Obviously, we're headquartered in Kentucky. We've been there 150 years. And just appreciate the discussion in and around the escalation that's set to occur on June 1st. And I guess if I had a question and a comment as well, is just sort of, I do view it in our mutual best interest to avoid escalation. And one of the challenges for us, as you know, is the March 4 and 5 suspension for both the UK and the EU basically now allows for all European and UK exports of distilled spirits to the United States duty-free. And so, I think you guys know, but, Catherine Tai was confirmed 98-0 in the Congress. And so just sort of, when we think about all these issues moving forward in terms of really just sort of what is a new U.S. perspective on fair and reciprocal trade. I just would sort of welcome some thoughts on, how we work together to avoid escalation.
Sam, I am a big fan of your products. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Peter, do you want to respond to that first, and then Kristen as well, maybe?
Well, certainly, yes. And I mean, I said earlier, I only arrived on my posting in the US last year, so I'm still waiting to become a full convert to the American version of the drink, but I'm willing to work on it whilst I'm here. But I think I have to say also that I take a bit of dislike to the use of the word retaliation towards the European Union, because in fact what we have done is given the US a discount on our rebalancing for 3 years. And what will happen in June, unless, of course, we're able to avoid this, is that the economic impact of our rebalancing will match the damage which the US has done to our exports back in 2018. But of course, we want to try and avoid and remove the trigger, which was the imposition of duties on European steel and aluminium, and therefore be able at the same time to lift the rebalancing that we have in place, or that we will put in place this coming summer. I mean, I think it is a regrettable reality that for a sector like bourbon, it's very visible, and it's a product which lends itself to being on retaliation lists, whether it's European ones or American ones. And of course, we would like very much to get back to the basis for transatlantic trade that was negotiated back in the Uruguay round, which was to have no duties at all, and therefore to have free and open competition between our respective excellent products. So that's certainly the goal to get back to as soon as we can. But I mean, it implies finding a solution on steel and aluminium, and that is partly or largely also a domestic discussion that needs to take place within the United States between US stakeholders, where, of course, for a third country like the EU, we're interested to bring our perspectives and our suggestions, but in the final analysis, it is something which the US federal government and working with its stakeholders needs to come to a conclusion on.
And Kristen, it's a good reminder. I'm sure that the two senators from the state of Kentucky probably have spoken with you, or certainly your leadership on these issues. I mean, because it's a big interest. So, what do you say?
Yes, I mean, it's a very big interest. And of course, yes, Commerce leadership has been contacted by the state of Kentucky about this concern. So we're very well aware of it. As I mentioned, at this point, everything's under review. We take it very seriously. We know that this is a major concern. And I do not have a time frame. I mean, we do know that the June 1st date is coming up. So I think people are actively working towards that and having discussions to see where we can end up before that. All I can say at the moment is that it is under review. Everything's under review to see, where measures might be changed or taken away or altered. So, but certainly note the concern, and Commerce's ears are wide open on this one. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's turn a corner a little bit. I want to come back to that workforce issue. James, specifically, I mean, I guess the question is, what's the biggest challenge that Mubea faces today, would you say, there in Northern Kentucky?
Well, I think in the US, there's a general tightening in terms of the availability of a manufacturing workforce. So I think that's certainly an issue we've seen here in Northern Kentucky. I think we've had a lot of support from the Kentucky Career Center, Chamber of Commerce, the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. So there's a lot of support, but that's something which I think across the US we've seen a tightening. It's not particular just to Kentucky. So that certainly is a challenge for us. I think global mobility is also a challenge, which is something I alluded to earlier. In my career, I've had the good fortune to move to about 7 or 8 different countries. And this is something which is not necessarily a nice to have. It's something which really, I think, allows people to gain a skill set and then bring them to a further location and to improve the location where they arrive. So I think immediately, I think it's Manning, which we are getting support here. And I think going forward, I think global mobility is something which I think should not be ignored.
Well, James, just take 30 seconds though and brag, because I mean, you're not getting support. I mean, Mubea is an absolute leader on this topic, and you're bringing German-style apprenticeship training programs here to Cincinnati. Just take 30 seconds and describe very briefly what you're doing.
No, absolutely. I mean, we certainly do bring German-style apprentice program. We've had it in place now for many, many years. We've won multiple awards. We have a large population currently in process, inverted commas, being trained, and we are successfully retaining a lot of those people coming out of the workforce. I think what's also important from a technology perspective, Mubea has consistently brought new technologies to the Northern Kentucky region, which also enables us to engage even a higher skilled workforce. And that's something which I think it should not be underestimated. As you mentioned, we have about 1,200 people here in the Northern Kentucky campus. So we're supporting thousands and thousands of people here in the economy.
Yeah. And James, I mean, I multiply that by the 2. First of all, we're very proud to have Mubea as a member of the European American Chamber here in Cincinnati because of that work. And then you multiply that by, the 225 European companies that are operating here. Again, bringing training, bringing new technologies, bringing new skills, new practices. I mean, it's just a huge boost for our economy. We still got a couple minutes for some Q&A, but before we get into that, I do want to open it for the. I do want to offer a quick poll as a reminder, or before we move on to the rest of the questions. Let me ask you to answer this brief poll. It's going to pop up on your screen. We really value your feedback, and so so that we can keep providing the most meaningful events. If you would respond to the questions that are going to appear on your screen. I'll just read through the questions while they're there. Question 1, prior to this event, what was your perception of the EU on the topics discussed? Question 2, after this event, what is your perception of the EU on the topics discussed? Question 3, do you agree or disagree? I benefited from attending this webinar. And question 4, do you agree or disagree? my organization benefited from attending this webinar. So that should be up on your screen now. We'd ask you to take a moment to respond to that. Give you just a few more seconds to get those last votes in. And just double checking the time. We've still got time for a couple more questions to go through. And again, if you still have questions, use that Q&A button. If you want to submit a live comment or a reaction, use the raise hand function. And hopefully somebody will let me know when we're done with the poll. I love this technology that we're using. It's actually very, very user-friendly, very helpful. So. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we talked about workforce and some of the work that's being done by European companies here in concert with a broad range of partners. Let's talk a little bit about environment. We touched on that a couple times. And again, James, let me start with you. We already talked a little bit about electrification and electric vehicles and so forth. What does that mean what might that mean for Mubea going forward?
I mean, for us, I think it means opportunity. We focus very much on high-end technology and lightweight, and both of those will be critical with the electrification of the automotive industry. Yes, we do have a powertrain division, but we also do have e-powertrain components, which we are developing and actively promoting with our customers. But I think for us in Mubea, we see electrification certainly as an opportunity moving forward.
Kristen, let me raise this with you and James or Peter, if you've got something to react as well. But again, trade, our environment, obviously very important for all of us. How is it impacting trade policy? How are we integrating some of that stuff into the way that we think about promoting trade?
It's having quite an effect, actually. I mean, the Biden trade agenda, has a comprehensive vision of reducing greenhouse gas, achieving net zero global emissions by 2050, and fostering U.S. innovation and production of climate-related technology. And so just a few weeks ago, I think people may have heard the U.S. climate envoy, John Kerry, traveled to Europe to reaffirm the administration's commitment to building momentum for the President's Leaders Climate Summit on Earth Day, the G7 Summit in London, and the COP26 later this year. So, I think that the focus has really shifted onto this. It's in most every discussion we have. And this plays right into how do our companies, U.S. companies, work with European companies to make this happen. Again, this has to be a partnership. I think no country, no region can achieve these lofty goals on their own. So it's really impacting everything we do in terms of how we view the trade relationships with our allies.
James, do you want to offer a quick reaction to that? Again, I think the ambassador touched on it. I'm sorry, I meant Peter. Peter, did you want to react to that? I think the ambassador pretty broadly covered a lot of that.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think there are. It's clear that on the European side, we have made a commitment to a green transformation, and we are basically taking the steps to translate the sort of the headline goal of for climate emission reductions into concrete regulatory actions, which will basically reduce our own carbon footprint from the economy and from within the EU. And of course, what that tends to mean for trade policy is what I mentioned earlier, which is sort of people look beyond the border and say, well, is this fair anymore? If we are making these efforts to be greener, but Europe is less than 10% of total greenhouse gas emissions, and the guy down the road or the guy down on the other side of the planet is not doing enough. And in a way, we have to show through trade policy that we can manage this. And part of it is of course, through negotiation with like-minded countries who are going in the same direction, not necessarily at the same precise speed or with the same exact details, but working together. And that's certainly something that we want to encourage. And we have been working in Geneva with a group of countries who go by the name of the Ottawa Group on trade, health, and climate issues. And there are possibly opportunities to reinvigorate negotiations that were going on up to about 5 years ago on environmental goods and services. And then, of course, we have to be ready to use our autonomous trade policy instruments to reinforce and to back up the environmental regulation and the climate regulation that we decide at national level, or in our case, at the EU level. So it's a very live area of work, and I think it is very much in our interest that we have a good communication, good dialogue between the EU and the US. And we're still waiting with, shall we say, bated breath to see what will be the US's own new targets, which will be announced, we understand, by the time of the climate summit in 10 days' time. And then, of course, that will show, I think, that the EU and the US are trying to go in a similar direction and manage the challenges that brings, including as regards the transition process.
Peter, we've got just a couple minutes left, and staying on the theme of environment. I mean, the European Green Deal is going to create lots of opportunities for investment, for development. Can you think of anything? And I'm going to also turn to Kristen on this. But do you see that the European Green Deal might create opportunities for American entrepreneurs, for American investors, for minorities, for people of color, for women-owned businesses, and then Kristen specifically, and we're going to have a whole other segment on kind of the resources that are available. But what resources would commerce be able to bring to support businesses that are trying to take advantage of opportunities created that Peter's going to describe for us? Peter, you first. Peter first.
Well, yes, I think basically one unavoidable theme is that this is an opportunity and a challenge, and basically it's a chance for individuals to show their innovation and their creativity, because we basically are looking for new ways of doing things. And that is basically open to anyone with a good idea from whatever their background. So yes, there are definitely opportunities to be seized in the field of green technology, new ways of doing things, new ways of managing processes, and I think the parallel digital transformation, which basically is moving us away from the traditional way of doing things, goes hand in hand with the opportunities that arise in terms of the green transformation. So yes, I'm optimistic that this will basically open a new front for cooperation and opportunity across the Atlantic, even while, of course, we have to manage and deal with the inheritance of the past in terms of the transitional issues. So I think it's very much an opportunity and an invitation to innovators and business people to use their creativity and find new ways of doing things.
And Kristen, over to you. I mean, what specific tools is Commerce planning to launch to support this green exports, if you will?
Sure. Well, I mean, yes, we're monitoring the Green Deal very, very closely. I mean, at this point, there are a lot of proposals out there that we're monitoring and seeing where we find opportunities for U.S. companies, and then we will magnify those. So at the U.S. Department of Commerce, the office that I work in is part of the International Trade Administration. We have the headquarters office, which is where I am, but we also have U.S. Export Assistance Centers throughout the country. And you will hear from one of my colleagues in a moment, Marcia, who's the director of the Cincinnati U.S. Export Assistance Center. And she can talk a little bit about the exact types of services they provide for U.S. exporters. But we also have a foreign service component. So we have officers in most embassies throughout the European Union. And anyway, those three parts work very closely together. I would say that for something like the Green Deal, as we do for everything else, we monitor closely the opportunities that we can then amplify to our network, and they can get that out to companies. But we will also monitor the possible regulatory issues that might arise, which is, something that happens anytime there is a major policy overhaul in any kind of area. And so I just like to note that our office at headquarters closely monitors the policy component. We monitor any trade barriers that might pop up or things that U.S. companies just aren't sure how to navigate. So in the past, we've done that, for instance, with the CE mark or REACH or the WE-ROS directive, things like that. So I just wanted to note for any companies that are on the line that on any of those existing issues or topics, as well as things coming up pertaining to the Green Deal, we are here to assist with the goal of making it easier for U.S. companies to partake in those types of technologies that are or opportunities that are coming up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know there's other questions that have come in. We're probably not going to have time to get to all of those. I do want to take just a moment to, or I want to lead now to this part of the discussion. Again, we know that the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is absolutely vital to all of us. It has the potential to be so much more, as you've heard. Many times, businesses just believe that trying to do business across the Atlantic is just too complex to contemplate. And that's why we're going to take just a few moments here at the end to hear about resources from both the European Union and from the United States government that are designed to help you grow your business in Europe. First, we're going to hear from Jen Riccardi. She is the Senior Trade Advisor at the EU Delegation to the U.S. in Washington, D.C. She's going to describe the new EU Trade Help Desk. And then we're going to hear from my friend Marcia Brandstad, who Kristen mentioned. She's the director of the U.S. Commercial Service Office here in Cincinnati and a member of my board of directors, explaining the resources that the U.S. Commercial Service has to support potential U.S. exporters. So let's go to that video with Jen now.
Good afternoon. As Todd said, I'm at the EU's embassy in Washington, D.C., where I work on trade policy, and I'm delighted that you joined us today. If you stayed with us this long, you understand what an important relationship it is, and perhaps you're thinking about how you can participate in it more fully. A great way to do that is to export to the EU, and I have a great tool to help you do so called Access to Markets, which is available on DG Trade's website. Why would the EU want to import from the United States? Well, for one reason, we realize that in order to export, we have to import, and we really do want products from the United States to enter the single market. To that end, I made a little video to introduce you to the tool. It's called Access to Markets, and with that, production, please roll tape.
Says Access to Markets. You can either go to DG Trade's website or simply enter the phrase Access #2 Markets in your favorite web browser. The Access to Markets homepage, I think, really demonstrates DG Trade's commitment and the European Union's commitment to free trade for all. To use the website, the first thing you need to do is determine the appropriate HS code. So let's add in the name of a product that we've been talking a lot about today, bourbon. Next, you're going to add in the name of the market from which you're exporting, the United States, and a country of destination within the European Union. We'll pick Germany. Click the search button, and you will next be asked to identify the correct product. Bourbon whiskey has several different HTS numbers that we have to look at. And so we can scroll down here to bourbon and identify which we have. Since Germans aren't big drinkers, we'll say shipped in 2 liters or less. Click on that, and it's going to pull up for us a bunch of different information. The first relevant information screen is on tariffs. It shows a 0% duty for exports or imports, rather, of bourbon from most places in the world. But for shipments from the United States, a special additional duty of 25% because of the ongoing dispute related to 232 tariffs imposed on steel from the European Union. If you want to know the relevant law or citation, you can click on these links right here, and that'll take you to the right regulation. The other thing that's really cool about this is it will show you taxes. Well, we're a single market, the VAT rates can vary from country to country, so you can play with this tool to determine where you will pay the lowest value-added tax upon importation. In Germany, it happens to be 19% plus an additional excise tax that you need to pay. Next, if you click on Import Requirements, it will show you significant information about any special requirements or paperwork that you need to have accompany your product in order to successfully import into the European Union's single market. This is particularly useful for foodstuffs, which might require special labeling or import statistics. Two other neat features here is trade flow statistics, which will generate for you information about shipments from the United States of your product to the country that you picked. And finally, some information on how to read the various results that you've generated. Another great tool of access to markets is over here in the toolbox, which will give you a tutorial. This is sort of graduate level work on how to use what we call ROSA, which is our rule of origin tool. This is mainly an issue for if you're shipping a product from a trade preference country, in other words, a country with which the EU has a trade agreement. But it can be helpful for you if you are shipping a product that has inputs from multiple places before the ultimate point of export. So just a quick tutorial, quick to show off of our Access to Markets tool. It's a wonderful tool for anyone that exports. And it's just one more way of showing that the EU really does want to buy your stuff. We welcome you to explore the European Union market. If you'd like to have more help on the ground, I'm going to turn now to my friend Marcia Brandstadt from the U.S. Commercial Service, who helps companies like yours who want to enter or expand into international markets. Marcia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Appreciate the introduction, and also that looks like an amazing tool. So definitely want to make sure that we share that with all our folks here. Also wanted to thank Todd and our great partner, the European American Chamber of Commerce. And also it was very nice meeting my colleague, Kristen Nagy, from our headquarters in DC. Kristen touched a little bit about what we do. Kristen had mentioned that she covers more of the policy end, and our division of the Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Service, is more on the marketing end. So we're the friendly marketing people who want U.S. companies to expand into, in this case, the EU and worldwide. So we are more or less the counterparts of Jen's European Union delegation to the U.S. If you take nothing away from what I'm about to say, just for a few minutes, want to just ask you to note two things. Number one would be trade.gov, trade.gov. And that is our main export portal. And everything I'm about to tell you about is on there. And then also just keep my name handy, Marcia Brandstadt. You can find me on LinkedIn, or if you put a dot between my name, @trade.gov, that is my email address. And anything I'm about to share with you, if you want more information or have me point you to the right people to talk to, feel free to reach out. Our mission is essentially to help U.S. companies market and sell their products and services overseas. So in effect, we are focusing on economic development, creating jobs, and benefiting the U.S. economy through exporting. So in addition to any U.S. companies that are here and interested in expanding internationally, we also are great partners for service providers, logistics, banks, because the more you partner with us and we help your clients, the more services they're going to need to use as they expand internationally. And then for economic development organizations, chambers of commerce and so forth, most of the time we understand that they're focused on attracting foreign direct investment. But another benefit that could be for your members that when you partner with us could be to do the economic development through exporting and help your local members expand as well. We are only rated on company success, so that's all we care about. And the way that we are set up domestically, we have about 107 offices. Specifically here in Ohio and Kentucky, we're in Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, where I am based. And we also have 2 offices in Lexington and Louisville. Our Cincinnati office also covers northern Kentucky and all points south of Columbus. The way that we're set up internationally makes us very, very unique. We are located in most U.S. embassies and consulates abroad, and we have commercial offices set up there. And for some of the smaller companies or countries, we do have partnerships with the State Department to still offer our services to companies wanting to sell there as well. So we actually have a presence in all 27 countries in the EU. The way that we're set up is they are typically headed up by what we call commercial officers, and these are the Americans that are in charge. And they're roughly equivalent to a State Department diplomat, and they will stay in their post for 3 to 4 years and transfer in and out. But where we really shine is with our commercial specialists, and these are our full-time folks based in the U.S. embassies and consulates overseas. Most of the time, they are from the country where they're based. So they are German natives, natives of France, for example. But even more importantly, they're also assigned industry portfolios to cover. So if a company that we're working with here in Cincinnati, for example, is in the automotive industry, there is a specific person that handles that industry in all of the countries where we have a presence. And that's our job, to work with our colleagues overseas to help companies get in and expand where they are interested in, or where we can help them find opportunities. Given our unique setup and how we have boots on the ground, both here domestically and internationally, I can talk all day long about all of the things that we can do to help our companies internationally. But what I'm going to focus on is more just right now through COVID, we are open for business, and we have some virtual services that we provide, and I'm just going to touch on that. But again, contact me. I'm happy to talk about anything and everything that we do more in depth. So we are able to identify new partners for companies, identify new end users, and specifically because we are the federal government, we can help companies if they need to get in touch with other foreign governments or health missions and counterparts overseas. We can do what we call an initial market check, which is a newer service that we do, but it will help companies save a lot of time and resources. We can canvass the country through associations and potential partners and see if a U.S. company's product or service is going to do well in that market before, again, those resources are spent. We can also do our virtual matchmaking services, where we can help identify potential partners and users in those foreign government agencies. And we can also set up virtual meetings for you to meet over the internet. We also can do full background checks on companies before a U.S. company signs a deal with a new partner. And we can also do partial ones if you just want to do a quick check as well. We have a lot of market research available on our trade.gov website. Off the shelf, you can search by industry and by country. And we also have, for every country where we have a presence, we have what's called country commercial guides. And it has a set of 10 to 11 chapters, and it's the same for all the countries. And it gives gives you a good overview of how to do business in a specific country and some of the things you need to think about, the top sectors for exporting to that country, and also travel and business information. We also can do customized services as well. Just let us know, and we can help you answer a set of questions that you had. Finally, I just wanted to mention that in addition to where we are located in the EU and overseas and how we help companies export, we also have a U.S. commercial service office at the United States Mission to the U.S. in Brussels. And they are set up specifically and designed to help U.S. companies understand and navigate the EU regulatory challenges. Kristen mentioned earlier about CE marking, the REACH chemicals, and the recycling hazardous substance rules and regulations that are in place. And more specifically, our office in Brussels can help navigate, help answer, and there are lots and lots of resources and reports on there as well. Specifically, we're going to talk about trade.gov. Again, remember, just take that away. If you want to reach that EU Brussels website, it's trade.gov/European-Union. And then we also have websites set up in every country we're located, and that's trade.gov/ type in the name of the country, and you can find us there as well. It was a pleasure talking to you and letting you know our resources, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Todd. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to say that concludes the formal panel discussion portion of our event. I want to say thanks to our panelists, Kristen Najdi from the Department of Commerce, James Sheehan from Mubea, North America, Peter Young from the Delegation of the European Union to the United States, as well as to our presenters, Marcia Brandstad and Jen Riccardi, Jen especially for all her help in organizing this. We were honored to have been asked to be a part of this event at the European American Chamber of Commerce. So we'll now have a short break to allow, before we have the beginning of our networking portion of the program. That will start at 1:15 p.m. And just as a reminder, if you have not already signed up for the conversation starter, look in the chat. That link is there. You can register now and still have time to set up some meetings and at least have your contact information there. It'll take you just 5 minutes to register, and the instructions on how to do that are there on your screen. You just create your profile by giving a short bio, what you and your organization is looking for, your request, and what you and your organization is offering, your offer. Once you've registered, you can then browse the other participants to find the right people to connect with, invite them to chat, and set your agenda for the 2-hour matchmaking session. The platform will automatically schedule one-on-one chats for you throughout the networking period. Again, the matchmaking event will begin at 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. We look forward to seeing you all there. And again, thanks for joining us.